Pennsylvania's Senate race is taking shape with new candidates emerging to replace retiring GOP Senator Pat Toomey. Republican candidate Sean Parnell, who was endorsed by former President Trump, dropped out of the race last month for personal reasons. Celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz threw his hat in the ring shortly thereafter. Former hedge fund executive David McCormick formed an exploratory committee last month and has already dropped over $2 million to advancing his bid, though has yet to formally announce. For more on the race, let's bring in Holly Otterbein. She is a national political reporter for Politico, and she spent a good part of her career covering the Pennsylvania political scene. Holly, good to have you back on the program. So we last spoke just after Trump-backed Republican candidate Sean Parnell dropped out of Pennsylvania's Senate race. Since then, television doctor Dr. Oz has announced his intent to run. How is his launch going? How has it gone?
Well, I think his launch was a little bit rocky when it initially happened because, there were a lot of stories that mentioned, of course, that, he is not from Pennsylvania, that he had been living out of state, until recently and now is basically, living in suburban Philadelphia, we're told. So that I think got him off to a rocky start with kind of the claims of carpetbagger being tagged to him initially. But, since then, he has spent an enormous amount of money on advertising already. He's dropped $4 million. That's a huge amount in the short amount of time that he's been in this race. And I think, his ads from talking to both Republican and Democratic consultants have resonated, it seems like. Polling has shown that he's not taking a commanding lead or anything like that. So, that is a problem for him, despite his pretty good name ID, obviously. But I think, he's spending a lot of money. He's running ads that people are noticing. And, right now he's still the biggest name in the race at this point.
Holly, I'm curious. So you say you've spoken to both Republican and Democratic pollsters who say that the ads by Dr. Oz are resonating. What specifically seems to be resonating? Do they know? Do they say? I mean, what part of that message at this early point, seems to actually be capturing some people's attention?
Well, he's kind of pitching himself as the doctor for Republicans amid this, health crisis that we have with coronavirus. Democrats are sort of seen as having their Dr. Fauci, regardless of whether or not that's actually the case. But that's sort of the perception. And I think Dr. Oz is sort of pitching himself as that person for the Republicans. And, it's worth noting, too, I got a hold of a Fetterman campaign. He's a Democrat running for Senate. Fetterman campaign internal poll that actually showed Oz doing quite well. Like, he was within single digits of Fetterman in a head-to-head, theoretical general election matchup. So I think that also turned some heads that writing him off, kind of similarly in the way that people did with Trump would be foolish. He's got great name ID. People know him. He's got a lot of money to throw around. He's already doing that. So, he's a serious force in the race.
So we're also expecting a campaign announcement from former hedge fund executive David McCormick. Politico reports a number of former top Trump aides are supporting his candidacy. Holly, what can you tell us about him?
Steve McCormick was a former hedge fund CEO. He resigned recently, stepped down in order to consider running for Senate. And as far as we know, he is imminently going to launch a campaign. He formed this exploratory committee. He also has spent, I believe, about $2 million on advertising already through this exploratory committee. So it's rather clear that he is going to jump in. And he was really recruited into the race by a number of Republicans in Pennsylvania and Washington who were really concerned about the state of the primary field. This was particularly before Oz got in, but even afterwards, with the departure of Sean Parnell that you noted earlier, who had to step out of the race after he lost custody of his children in a high-profile case. They were really worried about the field that they had, and in one of the most important races for the Senate in the country. I mean, the Pennsylvania Senate race, it could determine which party controls the chamber, and so they were really concerned. Recruited him into the race. And he is expected to launch quite soon.
Well, meantime, the Pennsylvania Democratic Party has filed complaints with the Federal Election Commission against both Dr. Oz and David McCormick. What is the basis of those complaints?
Yeah, they filed complaints with the FEC, essentially saying when it comes to Dr. Oz that he was capitalizing on his commercial products, that a lot of his things that he was using for his campaign had really come from his TV show, his TV logo, that sort of thing. And so they characterized that as an improper in-kind donation. And then when it came to McCormick, they basically argue that he is already functionally a candidate, that, you know, he says he's just thinking about running with this exploratory committee, but that's not the case. They claim that, you know, he's already spending enough money to characterize him as an actual full-blown candidate. And so, you know, we have yet to see whether the FEC does anything with these complaints, but clearly, you know, Democrats are, you know, getting tough on them right away, you know, want to already start the campaigns against them. This is a really important race. So, you know, any little bit of bad press helps for them.
All right, Holly Otterbein. Holly, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me.